Hello everybody. I hope you all are doing well. As we start looking into the first module, I wanted to point out a few definitions, also point out a few codes, and then directly transition into some of the codes that I will be using, which is taken from the book. And I wanted to point out how to read those codes and write those codes. So as we start, this is the first module. We will be talking a lot about network, hosts, or nodes. So I'm sure you are all familiar with what a network is. It is a structure where multiple computers are connected with each other through either a wired connection or a wireless connection. And the hosts are nothing but the computers that are connected to those networks. So you can have in a lab setting multiple computers, which are multiple hosts that are connected together within a LAN or a local area network, which are all connected through physical wires. However, the setting could be a little different where you have connections through a wireless connection. So a host or a node are basically computers that are connected to the network. A server, however, is also another computer which has a little different of an operating system which allows you to connect multiple hosts or nodes to itself. So when we talk about a server, it is nothing but a computer that is either hosted in a public domain which has an operating system which allows you to connect with other computers through a network or an IP address. Okay. You will also be seeing things like local area networks, client server networks, and I kind of gave you some brief on this already. I want you to go through and make sure that you understand these concepts from the book. I'm going to go directly to our HTML and the code. So HTML would stand for Hypertext Markup Language, and it has some history associated with it. The body which controls the standard is the Worldwide Consortium. They are the one that are coming up with these versions of HTML. Again, I would leave it up to you to go through the history of HTML. Here is a little table that lists out all the history. I want you to be familiar with some of it for quizzes or for questions on your quizzes and exams. However, this is not going to be what you'll be using or you'll be seeing when you're typing your code. The only thing you would be hearing is some of these codes are being deprecated, which means these are older versions of codes that are no longer being supported or used in our current standard. As we talk about HTML, it is also important for you all to understand that the software or the application that would decode the HTML is going to be your browser. So depending upon what browser you use, it could be Firefox, Chrome, the Internet Explorer, it could be any browser that you can think of would be able to interpret that HTML code that you're writing. However, you have to understand that some of those browsers have their own restrictions and capabilities. So it's very important that you test out your code in multiple versions or multiple browser if possible, so that it is being rendered in the correct format. And by the way, HTML is nothing but a language which would allow you to structure a page using different kinds of sections, colors, fonts, and you can always include multimedia, navigation, links, and things like that. So it basically makes a document that can be viewable or can be viewed through a browser over the internet. Some of the tools that we'll be talking about that you would be needing for your HTML are your editors. And we can use some basic editors such as Notepad or TextEdit. However, you can do a little more of an advanced ones, which are Notepad+, Eclipse, Coffee Cup. And these advanced ones would have a little more features than the basic ones like TextEdit or Notepad. And they would probably include things like line numbers, colors. It might even give you some assistance in the code. So as you're typing some code, it will give you some suggestions. So it has some autocorrect capabilities. It would give you some of the errors. It will also give you some suggestion. So this is what you would get with some additional or advanced editors. You can use, I do not have any restrictions on what editor you want to use. However, for our class, we would be sticking with either Notepad, Eclipse, or if I do type some codes in Mac, I would probably use the Komodo edit for the Mac, which are basically a Mac editor. And most of these things are available for free for you to download. So these are some of the popular ones. As I said, Dreamweaver we would not be using because I consider that to be a tool that would allow you to type your HTML. It does increase your production, but our purpose in this class is to type our code, by our hand. So we would be typing the code using one of those advanced editors. But again, there are other editors that you can use like NetBeans, Komodo, Aptana, Eclipse. Here is a section that I want you to pay very close attention to. So this basically takes you in and shows you how you would be typing your code. So you would open up an editor and you would be typing in HTML. By the way, these are called elements. We have certain lingos that we would be using and you want to be familiar with those lingos. So we call them these individual elements. Every code that you start is going to start off with HTML. So you would have an opening tag and a closing tag. So as you can see, the difference between opening and closing is this backslash that you have. These are called two-sided tags, which means if you open one, you have to close one. If you don't, sometimes it might give you an error. However, it's important to know that most of the browsers are pretty advanced and they're pretty forgiving, which means sometimes little mistakes here and there they would forgive and it will still render or show you the page correctly. However, if you don't see the page or if it is not rendered correctly, that is when you have to come back and make sure your code is correct. So you start off with an HTML, and this is what we call a little hierarchy. So you would start off with HTML, then you would have a head section, and in that head section you would include certain information, and one of the information could be the title of the page. So when you open up the page, it is going to have a title, and that is what is given by enclosing within the title tag. Again, it's a two-element tag. Once is the opening and once is the closing tag. After you finish with your title, you can also include some meta characters in there, which are empty elements, and it would contain certain information which is important for the browser to depict it in a clear way. So things like a meta char set UTF-8, this is a standard. You would probably use it once, but you do not have to remember any of it. You just have to make sure that you understand what those means. You also have another meta tag over here which says name viewport, and it's the content and it's a scale that you're giving. And then this is again important, is your link tags. So anytime you want to have your document link or connect with another one, you are going to be using link tags. This is also how you would connect your cascading style sheet. Although in the first chapter we would not get into the cascading style sheet, this is something that you will be hearing later on, because cascading style sheet would allow you to style your document in one place. Once we go over it, you will see that cascading style sheet would allow you to control the styling of multiple pages just by including a link like this. So I have two of the cascading style sheet that I'm using for this document or for this web page, which is going to provide me with this styling information, and we will get more into it later on. So as you can see, your head section would contain certain elements, things like title, the meta tags. Once we finish our head tag, we would then come to our body tag. Again, body tags are elements which are opened and closed. So you have a body tag that opens and closes, and then within the body you have a header. So you would start a header and you would close your header. Within your header, generally you would put in your image. Now, this is completely up to you. This is just showing you that this is how a page can be laid out. However, it is completely up to you as to how you want to design your page. So let's move on and show you a few more of the hierarchy. So this is my basic hierarchy with HTML, opening HTML, closing HTML. Then I have a head and I have some content within, and I have a body and I have some content within. This is another one that is important again for understanding the lingo. These are what we call the element attributes. So when you have an element, let's say I put in something like this is going to be my navigation, and then I can add attribute to it. Okay, I can say for example, I can use an element called h1 or h2, and then I can have an attribute which would be giving me more specific information, and I'll show you some more examples of it. So here is an example. So I said, okay, I'm going to write this element which is called P, which is paragraph. Okay, and then within my paragraph I can say that I want this thing to be hidden. Okay, and I'll give you more examples as we get into the codes. Make sure you understand what a white space is. White space is nothing but an empty or a blank character or a space. But if you want to add an white space, again, it has to be coded correctly. Just by leaving it blank, the browser may not show it as a white space, but we'll talk more about it later on. So this is how you would view any of your HTML. So as I was telling you earlier, you are going to be using a browser to open and see the styling that you created to create a page like this. You would need a browser, as I talked earlier, and it is also important that you test your page by using multiple browsers. In the next section of my lecture, we will get more into the details of the individual elements, but this is just a general structure of how HTML is going to work and how you would be viewing the HTML documents that you would be creating. Thank you.